Please welcome our AI panel, United States Deputy Attorney General, Lisa Monaco, Co-Director of Stanford Institute for Human-Centered AI, Fei-Fei Li, and Moderator, President and CEO, Equal AI, Miriam Vogel.
Well, let's dive right in. We're at RSA, the leading cybersecurity conference, and I think it's fair to say everyone in this room has thought about AI-enabled threats. AI-powered threats can threaten supply chains, critical infrastructure, and leak sensitive data. Dag Monaco, I know this is something you're thinking about all the time. What do you think are the top challenges that AI enables in the cybersecurity realm?
Well, thanks very much, Miriam, and you're quite right. We are thinking constantly about the threats we're facing from AI, but also the promise that it poses, and I hope we'll get to talk about that as well. But when I think about the threats that we are focused on from the Justice Department, from a criminal and national security perspective, as well as threats to equal opportunity and equal treatment, right? We are concerned about the ability of AI to lower the barriers to entry for criminals of all stripes, the ability of AI to supercharge malicious actors, whether it's nation states who are using it as a tool of repression and to supercharge their ability to engage in digital authoritarianism, the ability of AI to supercharge the cyber threat, allow hackers to find vulnerabilities at scale and speed and to exploit them. So there's a whole host of concerns we have, and that's before we even get to issues of harassment and supercharging online misinformation, disinformation, child exploitation material. I could go on and on with the parade of horribles, but we are very, very focused on getting at and responding to those threats.
Dr. Li, can AI be part of the solution here?
The short answer is yes, but the longer answer is that every tool humanity has created is a double-edged sword. From the first stone axe to steam, electricity, computers, airplanes, biotech, now AI. I think we really need to deeply recognize that. It's important to recognize the dual usage of every tool. So AI absolutely, like Lisa has said, that can lower the criminal activities and cause a lot of issues, but it's also a tool, it's a new computing tool to fight for criminal activities, to increase security, to actually detect fraud, to see patterns that are at a scale that no humans can, to also do predictions at a scale no humans can. So I think we do need to recognize both the threats as well as the opportunities.
Well, along with the cybersecurity threats you mentioned, Dag Monaco, I know you've talked a lot recently about a very imminent concern with election security and foreign interference. Time magazine proclaimed 2024 is not just an election year, it's perhaps the election year, with 64 countries going into elections, some already are. So Dag Monaco, with nearly half the world's population voting this year, what are you thinking about with AI-related interference, and what is the DOJ, the Department of Justice, doing to get ahead of these risks?
So, in addition to our public safety mission, there is no more important mission, I think, that we face this year than protecting our democracy. And when it comes to protecting our democracy, we think about protecting the most fundamental of rights. And there is not a more fundamental right that we have than our ability to have our voices heard, to vote. The right to vote is the right that secures all the other rights. And so we are acutely aware of the risks posed by AI when it comes to the right to vote. And again, the ability of malicious actors to disseminate misinformation, disinformation, to spread, at best, confusion, and at worst, real chaos and distrust in our system. So we are looking at a host of ways as to how we can address this threat. And the first thing we can do is apply the tools that we already have. There's lots of talk, I think, at this conference and many, many others that you've all been to about legal frameworks and regulatory frameworks and things over the horizon. But my own view is, while all of that is important to focus on, we also need to recognize that we're not starting from scratch. We have tools, we have authorities that we can use, and we must use to protect these most fundamental rights. As you said, 4 billion people will go to the polls or have the opportunity to vote. The question is, will their voices be heard? So I'll give you an example. It is illegal to knowingly spread and disseminate false information about the time, place, or manner of voting. And last year, the Justice Department secured the conviction of a social media influencer who was spreading misinformation, disinformation, false information on a social media platform about how to cast a vote. This individual said you can go vote via text. You can vote on a social media platform. Now, we all know elections are not American Idol. You can't vote that way. And so we brought an action and secured the conviction of this individual for spreading that misinformation and spreading that false information and literally denying individuals from having their vote counted and heard. Now, this case didn't involve AI, but it doesn't take a whole lot of imagination to figure out that it could, right? And to see down the road how AI could be used to supercharge exactly that type of scheme. So we are on the watch, and we will be very, very focused on using all the tools we have to get after those who are trying to deprive individuals of having their voices heard. Because at the end of the day, discrimination with AI is still discrimination. Price fixing with AI is still price fixing. Fraud with AI is still fraud. And we're going to be on the hunt and focused on enforcing.
Well, that's very reassuring. And I want to dig a little bit deeper into the technology we're talking about here, AI. And fortunately, we have one of the matriarchs of AI sitting here with us. Dr. Lee, you have an insider's view on AI development and also a unique vantage point as a mother, a caretaker, an immigrant, often the only female in the room, and a leading computer vision AI scientist. You literally taught AI vision. So all of that is beautifully explained in the critically acclaimed book you've recently published, The World's IC, that has been touted from everyone from a former president to the Financial Times. And I'd love for us to know, what do you see at this seminal moment for AI development that we can learn from you?
Thank you, Miriam. That is overly generous. I do see this as a civilizational moment. And the reason I call it a civilizational moment is because once in a while, we as a species, humanity, do create tools and technologies or have discoveries that fundamentally change our relationship and our productivity and the way we might live or do business. And we mentioned earlier the discovery of fire, the early scientific revolution, steam engine, electricity. These are all important moments. And AI fundamentally changes computing. And computing is everywhere. A lot of people ask me what AI is. And to me, one of the simplest but most fundamental way to think about AI is any place there's a chip, as small as a chip in a light bulb, or as big as a chip in a giant, airplane, there is computing. AI changes all of that. It's just a more advanced way of using data, using prediction models to change computing. So with that level of prevalence and power, it's a civilizational moment. It's a moment that calls for all of us, people around the world, and especially a country like the United States, to think about how we can really harness this tool, because there's so much potential. I know we're at RSA. I know we think about security and risks, but the flip side of this amazing tool is scientific discovery, is augmenting humans, is superpowering our teachers and students, is taking humans out of harm's way, is exploring the deep ocean, it's helping our environment. So this moment we can harness, we can hope to make our economy better, but it also will fundamentally change our society, change the way we communicate. It'll change our labor landscape. It might have risks for our democracy. It has profound implication to geopolitics. All this is why we see it as such a critical historical moment.
Well, we've talked about some of the legacy here as well as some of the innovations, and that leads me to thinking about you, Dagmonico, and at the Department of Justice, you mentioned that you have tools in place, you have authorities. This is not the first time you've dealt with innovation and some of the downsides and risks that come from innovation, but there are some new elements here, and I know you recently launched Justice AI. I would really appreciate if you could tell us a little bit more both about the policies and the programs you currently have in place that impact the enforcement and adoption of AI at the department, as well as Justice AI and what that intends to achieve.
Sure, and I think Dr. Lee's comments are so well taken, and I laid out the parade of horribles and all the risks we have to be worried about, and in my job, I do have to be concerned about that. Indeed, in one of my former jobs, I served as Homeland Security and Counterterrorism Advisor to President Obama, and because I was so focused on all the bad in the world, he had a nickname for me. He called me Dr. Doom. Every time I would darken his door, the Oval Office, is because I was telling him something bad. So I'm kind of constitutionally focused on that. But we can't forget the incredible promise of this tool. And it is a tool. It's not the be-all, end-all, and certainly when it comes to investigations and enforcement, we have to be very, very attuned to how we use this as a tool, as a tip, as a way to improve our capabilities, to hone our skills, but not as the single point of action that we take. And so when we think about what we can use and the impact of AI on the Justice Department's mission, it is across the board. Yes, we talk about criminal justice issues and we talk about national security issues, but the impact of AI on consumer improvements, on the ability to give individuals more access to justice is really profound. And so we are concerned about all of that at the Justice Department. And when we think about the tools we are using it for, yes, we are using it to do everything from sifting through and understanding and triaging the more than 1 million tips that the FBI receives annually to make sure that we are focusing human attention on the most important tips and reports that we receive right away. We're using it also to identify and understand and trace the source of opioids in our investigations. We're using it to sift through and understand huge volumes of data and evidence in some of our most important and significant investigations, including the January 6th investigation. So there's so much promise here. One of the ways that we are focusing on making sure that we are getting a full range of perspectives is by this initiative that we launched called Justice AI. And the reason we did it is, government is really good at talking to itself, but if we're going to make it informed policy, if we're going to really understand the impact of what I think is the most transformational and indeed the most disruptive technology that we've faced, and that is AI, we have to make sure we're getting a full range of perspectives. So we launched Justice AI, which is a series of convenings to not just talk amongst ourselves in government, but to reach out, to hear from civil society, to hear from academia, to hear from the scientists. And if you don't think I'm going to be roping you into Justice AI, you're wrong, Dr. Lee.
I'll give you my cell phone number.
Excellent. Because we need a broad range of perspectives to understand how we can harness the benefits of this while being alert and attendant to the risks, and importantly, to make sure that the benefits are broadly felt and broadly accessible.
Well, and talking about the study and understanding really what's happening in the world, we're so fortunate, Dr. Lee, that as the founding director at the Stanford University Institute for Human-Centered AI, you just released your 7th edition of the AI Index Report, recognized globally as one of the most credible and authoritative sources for data and insights on AI. This edition had some very important takeaways, including AI beat human in some tasks, but not all. So there's still some hope for us. The US leads China, the EU, and the UK as the leading source of top AI models. And last year alone, the total number of AI-related regulations grew by 56.3%. One of those chapters focuses specifically on responsible AI, near and dear to my heart, so thank you for that. And I'd love if you could tell us what are some of the most significant challenges in adoption and operationalization of responsible AI? And in addition, on the legislative piece, are there certain policies you're hoping to see come to fruition or that you're hoping never come to light?
Thank you, Miriam, for this question. There's a lot to unpack there, and your work has totally inspired us. And I also want to just acknowledge what Dag Monaco is saying about the collaboration between government and public sector and academia. You know, the founding of Stanford Human-Centered AI Institute, one of our belief is that we need to use AI to better human condition through policy collaboration. And this is something that, you know, not a intuitive idea from Silicon Valley, and we believe this technology is so important. Responsible development and governance is critical to our, our country's future, that we wanted to make sure we're at the forefront of pushing that bridge building. And obviously, we would collaborate and be a partner and really be at your service and the US government service for that. So coming back to the index, I'm actually really proud of my colleagues' work. I really cannot claim too much credit, but having this index every year is really a great way to continue to assess and evaluate and be honest about what this technology is where it's going. And this is one of the main roles I believe that public sector like Stanford University should play that role. And you mentioned some of the findings in terms of US leading and all that. There are two findings that actually I hope people do notice from this year's AI index. One is that scientific discovery is accelerating thanks to AI. I think this is profound. It doesn't necessarily hit the news of, Wall Street Journal every day. It's not a business-oriented piece of news that people like to read. But this is profound to our civilization. It's profound to our future. And this is what Dag Monaco is saying. There's just so much good things that can come out of it. Another thing that I think it's really, really interesting in talking about responsible use of AI is humans are augmented by AI. There are many, many use cases, from contact center workers to children learning, to even creators using AI. I'm not trying to rosify it. We do have issues we have to face, from copyright to intellectual property to, even just, cheating on homework. But the truth is that technology is here. We can use it to enhance and augment people, and that's part of the responsible use of AI, and we're seeing that as part of the trend. In terms of legislation, this is, how many hours do we have here? I just want to quickly point out, I am simultaneously hopeful, but also anxious, because the legislative landscape is getting more and more complex, and there's a lot more activities AI-related. But truthfully, at least honestly speaking, there's good legislation and bad legislation and everything in between. One piece of good legislation that Stanford HAI has been really putting a lot of work in is the National AI Research Resource. This is a bill right now actively in Congress and Senate called Create AI Act. It's a bipartisan, bicameral bill where we are looking for resourcing the US public sector with the kind of compute and data repository that is only right now available to a small number of, frankly, big tech companies. And this is really about, this is not about AI. This is about unleashing the human potential and taking advantage of the brilliant human capital of this country, democratizing the development, discovery, and and education of AI, and this is bringing the desperately needed resourcing to public sector, because public sector produces public goods, including the talents, and this is a good bill that I'm really, really excited about. But I also am concerned about some bills that are over-indexing on this existential crisis. In California, I'm seeing activities there where, humans' existential crisis is a topic of sci-fi. It is actually a topic that's worth discussing if you live like me on Stanford campus, because we imagine all kind of things. So not only you think about doom, we can also think about doom as well. But truthfully, for today's society, there's so much more real risks, from democracy to fairness and privacy issues, for job, and bills that are over-indexing on existential crisis is sucking the oxygen away from important societal issues. And it doesn't solve the real problem. For example, over-indexing on compute flops is too simple a way to think about modeling. It doesn't recognize the complexity of language models, image models, video models, climate models, and all that. And it might even, what is worse, is might even inadvertently criminalize open source community efforts, which is part of the fertilizer for this country's AI and technology ecosystem. And it's almost a giveaway to big tech companies that want to close down these technologies. So we have to be so thoughtful. I'm not saying we shouldn't be looking at AI legislation. I'm definitely saying we have to be so thoughtful about these bills, and also be pragmatic about when rubber meets the road, whether it's medical or financial, transportation. This is where we should. You said something so beautifully, I'm not going to be able to repeat as well as you said. You said, like, AI fraud is still fraud, right? AI misinformation is still misinformation. And this is where we should really pay attention to. So that's a long answer to your very thoughtful question. Sorry.
No, it's my fault for the multi-part question. I want to make sure we're learning as much as we can. And in fact, if you don't mind if I come back for a little bit more, given that we have someone who is a visionary in AI, as well as in the trenches in building AI, what do you think we can expect to see in the next horizon of 18 to 24 months in AI development?
Oh boy. It's gonna be, it's gonna be continue to be exciting. And when I say exciting, I don't just mean rosy things. We're going through election year. We are gonna see very interesting tension between, big tech, open source, and how we put guardrails around AI, but also keep fertilizing our ecosystem. As a technologist, I also find the technology moving in directions that's beyond our imagination. I know the past 2 years, we are hyper-focused on large language models, and it is such a powerful technology. It's just incredible. Even someone who's so close in AI was just really so awed by large language models. But the way that our relationship with each other, with the world, is beyond just languages. We live in this world. We live in a space of so many people, objects, and so I personally work in spatial intelligence. I work in robotic learning. I work in vision, and these multimodality models, spatial intelligence models, agents models. I think there's just a lot more that goes beyond language models, and I'm excited by that.
Well, then we are too. Please.
Can I just say one thing? I mean, Feifei said something really great, I think, about we have to be mindful of the existential threat, but not lose our focus. I think it's so important for us to remember that we can't be so distracted or so focused on the existential threats that we aren't spending the time that we need to focus on how we are protecting against the use of this technology to exacerbate existing biases, right? I mean, it's something we are very focused on. It's one of the reasons why with Justice AI, we want to use the learning that we get from these many different perspectives that we're gathering to inform, for instance, the report that we will be doing as part of the President's executive order on how AI will impact the criminal justice system, right? We have to be focused on putting those guardrails around our existing use so that we are making sure that we are harnessing those benefits, that we are not so focused on the existential threat that we aren't making sure that we're using this deeply important technology consistent with our values.
Can't agree more. I think you nailed it. Really focusing on what are the societal risks that impacts everyday people, everyday citizens, everyday life. I think it's the most important thing.
And we've been fortunate, Dagmonica, with the way the department has been proactive, coming out with statements warning people, putting them on notice that they could be violating people's rights by using AI without knowing it. And as you've all just underscored, that does not make them less harmful crimes. It does not make them less liable. And so we really appreciate how you've, as the Department of Justice and joint statements, have gone out proactively to warn people to avoid this. But unfortunately, we're going to need to close out. So as we leave today, and I'll start with you, Dagmonica, what are 2 things you want to make sure everyone in this room walks away knowing and being clear on with regard to AI?
I think we all in government, in science, in industry, we need to be exercising leadership. We need to be looking at how we are using this technology, how we're developing this technology in a way that builds trust, not just builds and focuses on speed, right? And I think we need to think about how we are exercising that leadership. That's what we are trying to do really thoughtfully in the Justice Department. And the second thing I would say is, and you all both are tremendous ambassadors for this with both Equal AI and with the AI for All initiative that I know you're involved in, Fei-Fei. And that's, I think we all need to do our part to build out and build up. Meaning we need to make sure we've got a pipeline of those different perspectives and that talent coming into science, coming into government to work on and develop and use this technology in a way consistent with our values. And then we've got to build out as well by making sure that the benefits of this technology is broadly felt and broadly accessible.
Yeah. Well, 2 things. As a technologist, I think what's most important is imagination. And I think I can imagine so many things that goes beyond what we have today as the language model focused AI. You know, I talked about the spatial intelligence, multimodal, large models. And I think, you know, we're in the middle of Silicon Valley. I really hope all of us have just continue to imagine what this technology can do, and truly sky is the limit. There's so much we can use this technology to make this world much better and for everyone. Segueing into that is the second point is, I find myself as an AI scientist reminding everybody we're actually humans and there's nothing artificial about artificial intelligence. It is a tool that is meant to augment us, our own agency, our productivity, our well-being. And I think we cannot forget about that, whether we are developing the technology itself or designing products or teaching our students or serving our citizens. Let's remember the goal of AI here is to enhance the world that humans live in and to give, continue to lift everybody, to give back the agency and augment our agency. And I think that is, in all these AI conversations, that point tends to get lost and we forget what AI is. AI is a tool to help people. And I want to make sure we remember that.
Well, thank you for helping us build the tool and build it in a responsible way and bringing more people into the fold who can help participate and make sure that it's responsible and trustworthy. Thank you, DAG Monaco, for making sure that it is trustworthy, and when it's not, it's great to know you're on the case so we can all feel a little safer leaving the room today. Thank you both.
Thank you.